record. Perfect. Okay. Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Agility Leadership Meetup. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Ashley Duker. I'm co-host along my amazing co-host Giles Lindsay.
Hi, everybody.
Good. Great. So we caught up with Nigel about a month ago now after his big European tour, and he posted something pretty pithy on Facebook. And on the back of that, we had a good conversation about the nature of human complexity and arrived at the punchline and topic for this talk tonight, where organizational complexity is human-derived and why lean and agile methods are not enough. So tonight, Nigel's going to challenge our thinking on how complex problems actually are that we face at work and how to overcome them. So it's going to be a really good time. Please get your questions ready, get the banter ready. We're going to do the standard, but for about 40 minutes-ish, Nigel will present and then we'll go into a good healthy Q&A / maybe, I don't know, a little bit of debate. I'm hoping for something nice and juicy tonight. And just to let you guys know, this is actually the first of a mini series per Nigel's recommendation, where when we were catching up about a month ago, Nigel kindly recommended to just bring his mates along. So we've got Dave Snowden lined up for January, kind of building on what's going to talk about tonight. And then we've got Simon Wardley just 2 weeks later, first week of Fed, who will just kind of take it home for us. So this is going to be an awesome little mini series. Now, for those of you that don't know Nigel, but I'm sure most Nigel, I'm sorry, you can't trust the American.
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a foreign land for you, Ashley. It's a complex thing, but I mean, I've got the English accent. Dave's got the Welsh sort of accent.
I know. Apologies, Nigel, for those of you
good grief.
And I'm sure everyone does. He's, creator of the award-winning Scrum the Toyota Way training course. And following your background, Nigel, we've got, co-creator of the Flow system. So you're also a Forbes noted author and keynote speaker and a professional Scrum trainer, amongst many amazing, experiences that you hold. So without further ado, Nigel, over to you, really.
Yeah, when you told me that Dave,
just one point of reference, just one thing I just wanted to add in. We are going to do a Q&A. If people do want to put their questions into the chat throughout this, prefix it with a little Q to let us know. We'll queue them up and get them ready for Q&A later. Thank you.
Just reading some of the chat messages about maybe Walmart should do a design thinking session on that. And because that won't be on the record, the people who watch the recording will be clueless as to what that comment's in relationship to. But Ashley didn't tell me that she was going to go and get Dave and then Simon to follow me afterwards. And then Dave, of course, I was in this thread of emails with Ashley afterwards where Dave says he's not quite sure if he agrees with my proposition, and it's more of a proposition I made in a talk I gave in Poland a couple of months back, and I started thinking about this a lot. And the more I think about it, the more I think I'm right. But I'll figure out whether you guys think I'm right afterwards. But we're going to use Menti. So depending on how you're connected to this, you might want a separate device or another tab in a browser or something. As we're going to use Menti, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I've been doing with a couple of clients. Instead of just presenting to you, I'm going to ask you a question or ask you to do something for me, and then I'm going to give you what I think the answer is. And I'm going to build this up, and I'm going to start with some really basic stuff, because this thing's called the Agile Leadership Meetup. Is that right, Ashley? Is that the name of it? Yeah. So I thought I'd have a bit of fun to begin with, and I'm going to share my screen. Make sure I get I have to get rid of this thing there, and then I'll share my desktop here. Let's do that. So my first question, close down the picture of the guy in Walmart. The first question I've got for you on Menti, and I guess everybody knows how to use Menti, I'm pretty sure, but go to menti.com, use the code 3490 3291 with the chat box over here, and tell me you can see this Mentimeter screen. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see the Menti screen I'm showing. Good.
Yeah, we can.
All right, so I shared the whole screen. So I have two monitors in, it sometimes faffs around. So somebody tell me, what is the Agile Mindset? And then we'll see. and I'll have a bit of fun after that. What is the Agile mindset? And you'll notice that I hide the responses. And this is a tip. I mean, I'm sure some of you know this, but dot voting only works if you can't see the other people voting. So any type of ask somebody something where everybody else can see the answers, whether it's dots or comments or responses, is meaningless if you show everybody what's happening, what other people are saying, because then, and Dave will argue the terminology with me, that you'll bias their decisions. Of course, Dave talks about cognitive heuristics, but essentially, if you see how your boss is voting or somebody else who's influential or what they're saying, you go, oh yeah, I agree with them. And that's useless when you want to do any form of sense making or any form of sort of impartial feedback from audiences. Okay, so how many people we got participating? I have to look how many people have jumped in. There's about 27, 28 of you, I think. So we got 12 responses. So this is where we figure out who's interacting and who's context switching and can't be bothered. They got it on in the background while they're what time is it in the UK? You're watching Coro or something? Is that still a thing?
Quarter past seven in the evening.
So Coro used to be on about 7:30 or something. Is that right? I don't know. I don't remember anymore.
No idea.
For the non-Brits, they're completely clueless now. Ashley's sort of been adopted as a Brit. So, all right, let's have a look at what some of you are saying, because this interests me a lot. An adaptive and growth mindset, a growth mindset, being prepared to learn, collaborative, learning, flexible, one that adapts to change, continuous improvement. Some of you know me, of course, and you know my rhetoric. The Agile mindset is a thought process. It involves understanding and collaborating, learning and staying flexible to achieve high-performing results. Somebody really thought about that answer. Focus relentlessly on the customer and achieving outcomes in the best possible way, depending on the situational complexity, pulling from various tool sets. Trust, empowerment, transparency, one that supports lots of words, one that supports a dynamic way, be open to change. So being nimble and fast. I had this discussion the other day with people. I don't know if I got the slide in. I can't remember what slides I put in this presentation. Agile has nothing to do with being fast. Nothing at all. It has nothing to do with working faster. It has something to do with making faster decisions. So maybe I'll get back to that, but I'll pose that to you and you can I love this one, oversimplification. Whoever said that, you got my vote. All right, let's have a look what I think. I'm gonna have to just do my button on my slides. Well, that's me apparently. So let's look at this Agile mindset thing. And I did this talk in Poland, so I'm using a slide here that I used in Poland when I spoke with the Lean Institute there. So, and this is my new favorite word in German. It seems that all these people who are experts in one thing or other pick German words. You'll find a lot of the high performance teaming folk to do this as well. My friend and co-author and colleague Ponch, Brian Rivera, he does this all the time. But so the Oxford English Dictionary, if nobody knows what the OED is, defines this word. And I have to I got a German to teach me how to say this correctly, so I'll see if I slaughter it. But Weltanschauung, it basically means the worldview around us. And then I started bringing this differentiation between mindset and behavior, because this Agile mindset drives me nuts. And I wrote something online today about it, and I actually used this slide if anybody caught up my LinkedIn ramblings. So a person's worldview, a person's perception or set of beliefs that they have gained from all these external inputs, external triggers, forms their mindset. What we actually are more interested in is their behaviors. And this is an English dictionary definition of it: the way in one acts or conducts oneself or behaves in response to a particular situational stimulus. And in the book we wrote, and some of the work I do with other colleagues, we talk a lot about the OODA loop. And the OODA loop is all about how people make decisions, and it's all about how they process and internalize external signals to give them implicit guidance and control. So a mindset is a series of self-perceptions or beliefs people hold about themselves. So you can't go shoving that onto other people. Otherwise, you end up with something we commonly call groupthink, which is, I mean, I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with this as practitioners, but groupthink is where we all nod furiously and agree with whoever is got the loudest mouth or the biggest opinion in the room, or typically the most authority, often called the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. And typically this is where we all go. So is this what we want from an agile mindset? Because this is what the agile trainers and practitioners would tell us, that we all just need to get the agile mindset, and we all nod furiously. And that reminds me a little bit about this thing that another famous guy wrote, you know, Orwellian humor here, George Orwell's 1984. Well, this is groupthink, folks. This is a group mindset. And I propose that what we actually want is something we call a shared mental model. And I'll talk a little bit about culture in a moment and how this all fits into that. But we really want to get a group, people who have a collective understanding, perception, knowledge about a situation, a problem, a process shared amongst them. So we get an alignment as opposed to an indoctrination or a religion, which is a lot how Agile has sort of turned out with itself a little bit. I made these literally the other day and I find these quite useful. I do a lot of work with people who don't speak English as a native first language. So I'm dealing with a lot of people in Hungary. I'm dealing with a lot of people in Latin America. So Spanish, Portuguese, Hungarian, and many other languages, because they're multinational companies. And a lot of these words end up as synonyms, because in their language, there is actually no differentiation between the two terms and the two terminologies. So when we start talking about a shared mental model and an alignment, what we're talking about is collaboration, not cooperation. And most people are cooperative. In other words, they'll help each other out, but they're not invested or vested in the outcomes, nor do they care, because there's no collaboration, which is a shared ownership, a shared accountability, and an interest in that specific outcome. And unless we've got clear goals in this shared mental model, then we don't really have collaboration. I won't do it in this particular presentation, but I use a slider as a sense-making tool when I talk to organizations, and I get them to tell me when I've gone through this, how collaborative or cooperative they are in their organization. Both are good things. One is better than the other. And you start to find that they start to use the dot voting, but anonymously, and they start to have clusters around cooperation. If you've got an organization that's predominantly cooperative, you've got people going in a billion different directions, and there's no clear alignment, there's no shared outcomes, there's no shared goals. And although they're all very busy and they're all trying to help each other out, you basically got a lot of confusion, even chaos. So you're going into this aphoretic state that Dave talks a lot about. So actually what we want is much more collaboration. That's the sort of work we want. Now, because of this accountable versus responsible, all the ex-project managers know this well. You've written plenty of RACI or RACI matrix or matrices in your time. But in Spanish, and Ersin, who's on the call, told me just earlier in Slack, there's no real differentiation even in Turkish to these two terminologies. And so when we talk about somebody being accountable, we talk about whose head's on the chopping block, who's ultimately, and this is the confusion, who's ultimately responsible if it goes wrong. That's the accountable person, where the responsibility is basically those doing the work. So responsibility is about owning the work. Accountability is about owning the decisions. And so it's important, because when we talk about collaboration, we talk about joint accountability. And this is where, when we talk about accountability jointly, we own the risk, we own the decisions, and we own the sort of ultimate responsibility if this thing doesn't work, goes wrong, or something undesirable happens. So we really need to start understanding these phrases and understanding and moving away from this silly mindset nonsense. And this is another one I use, is emergent learning occurs through a teamwork, not in a framework. So please stop banging the drum with all the frameworks out there and all the different methodologies. All tools are useful, as we will find out in a few minutes, but all tools have limitations. So let me ask you another question in Menti. Let's see if this will work for me. Here we go. So you told me what the Agile mindset is. Now tell me what Agile is. Tell me what Agile is. I'm looking at you because you and I know each other, and she's like,
Capital A Agile or agility, Nigel?
Oh no, what Agile? I'm very specific of this word. What is Agile? What is Agile? And I'm doing this for a bit of fun. I am going somewhere with all this. We will eventually end up in the right place at some point. So okay, so we've got 3. Okay, are we done 12? Give you a minute or so more. Somebody, you have to keep me honest on time because I put a bunch of these together, so I thought it was a bit of fun. Just if any of you are presenting to companies, by the way, I've started to use this technique a lot because we turn up and we get our PowerPoints out or our keynotes out and we go blah, 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 blah. This is what Agile and blah, blah, blah is and all the rest of it. And we just talk at the people. And what this does is get them much more engaged because they start to get much more enveloped in this. And we also, it gives us a lot of amazing data points. I did this with an international bank this week, actually, and a couple of sessions last week. Over 200 people have gone through a different process, but same type of tooling. And we gathered hundreds of data points, and we're able to see patterns and clusters and similarities. And that's given us a whole bunch of information to help us direct coaching and learning and support and training for 2022. So it's actually very valuable if you're a consultant or even a practitioner in an organization, an employee, a contractor, to use these techniques. Let's have a little look. So ability to adapt to change, flexibility with a focus on the customer, adjective, somebody's using the dictionary. I know I like the dictionary. Able to move quickly and easily. Agile is a way that co-workers agree on with respect how they work. Buzzword, silver bullet. Yeah, love that one. A tortured dogma descended from the Agile Manifesto. That's brilliant. You ought to put your name on that. That was worthy of citation. A mindset based on a manifesto. You see, this is a problem with a mindset because your mindset is different to my mindset. And our mindsets are emergent. And I'll come to that in a short while. And the ability to change and up, lots of things, something I'm getting sick of hearing about at times, easier to describe what it is not. I'm with you on that. You know, an agile mind is dev teams and scrum cycles. Agile is a movement, it's a way of thinking that defines 4 values described by 12 principles. Somebody's really on the money there with the description. So let's have a look what I think it is. And I sort of break this down a little simpler. For some reason, the Mac has to do things twice. Anyway, it's just a philosophy. That's all it is. I mean, there's the values and the principles are behind them. But there's a slight nuance on the working software / product thing now because everybody is born in software, evolved into product. It's just a philosophy. It's a belief system. For some, a religion. It is a dogma for many as well. But it was just, you know, a bunch, I haven't got the photo, but 17 guys, men, don't know why it was 17 white men that got together, but it was 17 white men that got together. Obviously, in 2001, the word diversity hadn't entered the lexicon at the time. And they came up with a philosophy, which was just, and they're good points. There's nothing wrong with them. They all talk, but if you look at them, they all talk about behavior. It's all behavior driven. Now, maybe they didn't think about it at the time, but when you look at individuals and interactions, customer collaboration, you know, working products over faffing around with too much documentation and responding to change, these are all behavioral traits in my view. So it's just a philosophy. And because Ashley was on the money earlier, the next thing I'm going to ask you in Menti, you described Agile, now describe agility. What's agility? If Agile is the philosophy, what is agility? I'm going to drink some of the water I opened with the gun earlier. I don't know if you're recording that earlier, actually. So I'm thinking people will watch this back and go, did he open a bottle with a gun? How did that happen?
Yeah, I think that was on record. I think that was on record.
So
Now those
we'll
are
find out.
watching at home. Now you know this was a gift. This was a gift
So-
received in Texas. I'll
Yeah,
say
in
no
Texas,
more.
we just shoot the tops off bottles, you know. We're real people in Texas. So
If need be, Nigel, we'll get you to record it again at the end, and we'll just sort of somehow tack it in.
well, I'm going to go and find another bottle to pop then. So, all right, we got some responses. So describe agility. You don't have to write too much. I appreciate the time. And of course, this does create great data. And if anybody wants the data points after this, I'll share them back with Ashley and Giles, and then they can distribute them to you. It'll just be an Excel spreadsheet and a PDF file. But, you know, this is not secretive data or anything of this nature. All right, we've got enough responses to have a little look. Ability to think and understand quickly, one of the many benefits of Agile, by far not the only one. Practicing the philosophy of Agile, your interpretation of the philosophy, that's getting closer. How quick to change, flexibility, open to change. Yeah, a few good things here. If Agile is the philosophy, then agility is the exercise of that philosophy. Abilities, you get lots of, it's always a problem when you're to meet up with lots of clever people because they're very deep thinking. Following the principles, that's more like a religious sort of following. Agility is a state of flow to get into, to evolve, and to meet the needs of the situation. The frameworks are tools that help you create emergent ideas, but the goal is to get towards emergent. Wow, I love that answer a lot, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. It's somebody been reading my book too much, but say my book, lots of clever. So this is my view. Agility is just an emergent property of the way we do work and the way we behave. So principles guide us, values, principles, they give us, it's more a philosophy, and we can choose to align towards that philosophy. And not even I put the culture slides in here, maybe I did. Oh yeah, I did. I'll get to that in a bit. So it's just really an emergence. So flexibility, adaptability, agility, we desire these things. We desire to be more agile. We desire to be more flexible, more adaptable. That's what the posters say on the vision statements in these organizations we all work and exist. But it's just an emergent property. Agility emerges as we do things. If you do things in a certain way, we work, behave, act, and collaborate in different ways, we may become more agile, and agile, or this concept of agility will emerge. And I'm not saying this is a definitive list, but I defined 4 levels of agility just for working with organizations. And again, you could probably expand the list or nuance some of these a little bit. So when we talk about business agility, organizational agility, and that's what you need to be talking about when you're talking to executives, they do not care about Scrum. They don't even care about Cynefin. They don't care about methodologies. They don't care about frameworks. Trust me, they don't. They're too busy to care about them. And when I talk to a lot of C-suite execs, and I work with companies, you know, from 3,000 to 300,000 people, even larger than that in my Toyota days, they are not interested in all the methodologies and things being used in the weeds. What they're interested in is what does it mean for them and what is their role in helping their organization to grow a greater agility. Now, they usually have reasons for being agile: save money, work faster, deliver quicker. And I sort of have to reset a few of those ideas for them. But business agility is how fast you can change direction, pivot, if you prefer, to external events and triggers, often before your competition does. So how quickly can you respond to the markets, to what's happening out there? And then we look at product agility, and Dave often talks about unarticulated needs. That's the guy in the teacup in the middle there. Product agility is rapidly responding to the needs of your customers, often before they discover those needs themselves. That's this unarticulated needs. And simply, how fast can you get features, functions, capabilities, new services, new offerings to your customers? Do they spend 6 months in meetings about meetings, or can you give and empower the teams, the people doing the work, to deliver those features and functions rapidly to your customer base? That's product agility, nothing to do with tools or methodologies. This is all behaviors. This is all attitudes and behaviors, and whether you are willing to trust the people who do the work and whether you empower them effectively. And then we get down into the sort of methodologies a little bit and some of the tools that are out there. And we're looking at team agility, being able to respond rapidly to emerging requirements, new requests, surprises, the unknown unknowns, the things that jump up and bite us, especially if we're doing what a lot of us term as complex work. Although I suggest that most of the work we do isn't that complex, it's complicated. It's not that complex. So that's what I see team agility as. And then your individual agility is how willing are you to be adaptable and flexible in the way you work and support your team? You see, it's behaviours again. How willing are you to change your bad habits, your dogma, your individual mindset to better support the people, so you gain team agility, so you can deliver on this product and business agility? As I say, there could be other nuances there, but this is how I've been sort of talking to some organizations. Then I started to look at this whole iterative, incremental, or reactive, and I wrote a good ramble about Scrum on LinkedIn a year or so ago, which gets pulled back occasionally. You can look at it, it's one of my articles. When I talk about Scrum isn't really empirical. And it is based on empiricism, but most use of it is not empirical. And so this made me write this. And I said, well, what is iterative? If something is truly iterative, it means you're changing the requirements as you build the product based on experiments. That's what Scrum was originally designed for. Whereas if you're being incremental, it's just additive. Each sprint adds sequential features or functions, probably on a list in a backlog or somebody's requirements document or something similar. And most PI program increments in SAFe are very much like this. It's 10, 12 weeks of incrementally adding stuff, and really the very few SAFe organizations stop every 2 weeks and change the requirements based upon real feedback from real customers, real users. They just incrementally continue. And that, what do they call it now? The IP sprint, the innovation and planning sprint, which used to be called the HIP thing, the hardening, innovation and planning, is really the 2 weeks when you do all the things you couldn't get done in the other sprints. I once went into Pepsi and drew all this on a board and explained it. And he said, how do you know us so well? And that was the head of Agile at Pepsi in Texas. So, and then you've got reactive. So reactive work is really responding to customer feedback without dialogue. So you're not engaging the customers in this, you're just reacting when something goes wrong, or the customer sticks the hand in the air and say, hey, that thing you gave me or delivered isn't what I wanted, rather than those continuous feedback loops. So the Agile Myth, I put this, incrementally building requirements is not agile. It's just measurable. Think about that. If you're not iterating the requirements, if you're not talking to the people who care, typically the people who pay the bill or who are going to be the eventual consumers and giving you revenue, money, because a customer, the definition of a customer is they give you money. So the thing is this, that at the end of the day, it's just measurable. Doesn't mean it's worth anything, because you can be very efficient and very awesome at delivering in a very lean way, but delivering no value. Just something for you to ponder on and hit me with in the Q&A. So look, I created this the other day, the Agile Myth. Your current tools and practices are seen as slow and cumbersome, and your agile tools and practices are seen as super duper fast and nimble, and you're healthy and faster and quicker and work harder. And that's just nonsense. The agile doesn't make you work faster. And the thing you got to worry about is if you're going too fast, you end up with this. And we see this all the time. We just end up with people being pushed on endless deadlines, and you're agile now, you should work faster, and we end up with bad product. So being agile is about making faster decisions, better decisions, not working faster. And for the lean folks in the room, lean is all about optimizing value and quality, the principle of Jidoka, building quality, automation with the human touch, just in time about eliminating all the non-value added activity and some of the key principles beneath of customer first, etc. And agile is really about making faster decisions. These are my opinions. You may not share them, of course. So talked a little bit about culture. So let's have another Menti question. Define culture for me, please. Define culture. No Googling and dictionary definitions. What's your definition of culture? Because we always blame the culture. we always say, well, the company culture doesn't allow that, or if only our culture was like this, if only we were more like SpaceX, or if only we were more like a startup. So these things are not, these things always amuse me a little bit. So how would you define culture? Again, we don't need a complex definition, just a, what your thoughts are. We've got a lot more responses coming in this time, much more quickly. This is good. Oh, by the way, Doctor Who shares its birthday with me. I'm just letting you know that, just for those that care. And if anybody saw Doctor Who this weekend with the Weeping Angels, that was like jaw-droppingly good. For those that have no idea what we're talking about, it's okay. Your life is incomplete, but it's okay. So, all right, let's have a look at what we're saying. Wow, they were fast. So, a way of acting. I don't want to go there. Bless you. So, somebody should know what the Texas term was. Oh, bless your heart. I mean, Texans will know what I mean by that. Shared social norms. 'Tis the way we do things around here. Who was it who said that the other day? I can't remember. Way of life, traits, behavior, collection of small behaviors. See, I like some of these phrases, the way of life for an entire society, the way people behave and coexist. All right, so I'm getting some things. You can't stop that now, Nigel. Even anthropologists can't agree on a definition. Culture is a scapegoat for companies applying the wrong tools for the situation and needing to oversimplify something very complex. That's impossible. So I'm going to do my best here. And there's some really good, of course, somebody's read some of the things I've written, or at least agrees with me strongly. So let me tell you what my slides are here. And I'll see if I can get to something here. So this is what happens in most organizations. And I saw this a long time ago and made a slide of it because it just had me laughing my head off. Other people don't find it as funny, but, let's change culture. And the lady says, okay, go get the laminator, you print the posters, So because we start printing these posters, if anybody remembers Deming, work harder, work smarter, do your best, because this, of course, will change the culture, which we know is absolute nonsense. So this is Jeannie Ross of MIT. She's one of these people that was being referred to in the Menti responses, but she considers herself an organizational theorist. She's one of the top professors currently, a research scientist at MIT, and she says, this is a quote of hers, and I think I took this from Forbes, but she's been in Harvard stuff and other things as well, Sloan Review. She suggests that people don't start blaming culture, because once you say your culture doesn't allow it, you give yourself a problem you're not sure how to solve. You really do start to get into the world of truly complex problems when we start to think about this. So for me, culture is emergent. It's a product of our behaviors. Now, there's dictionary definitions of culture, which I'll get to before I build out when I get to the end of this slide. So you can neither plan a culture or create it. It emerges based on how we conduct ourselves. So if you don't like your culture, you've got to adapt the way we behave, because it is a collection of how we all interact, how we behave towards one another. And talking about the old Agile philosophy thing, you start with a philosophy, which is what the Agile Manifesto is, and there's lots of other philosophies out there. Most of your company vision and mission statements out there are some sort of, platitude-laden philosophy. So, and that's defined in the dictionary as a theory or attitude held by a person or organization that acts as that guiding principle for behavior. These are dictionary definitions. I didn't make them up. I'm not that clever. You can then craft behaviors, which are defined in the dictionary as the way in which one acts or conducts oneself, especially towards others, to try and achieve the philosophy. Assuming you've got a shared mental model and you're aligned and you've got some shared and common goals, a goal is that, at least two or more people working together on a shared or common outcome. And so then we get to this mindset thing, and we talk about fixed and growth mindsets, which is something that's been around for the last few years. So behaviors lead to an emergent mindset, the established set of attitudes held by someone. So you align to a philosophy, You tailor the way you act, behave in a certain direction to achieve the philosophy because you're aligned to it. You agree that outcome, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And as a result, your mindset emerges, which is why when everybody says you just need the agile mindset, it's just nonsense. It's silliness. And then culture emerges, and the abridged definition of a culture is the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular social group. So again, it's this group of people working together in a certain way. So your company culture is emergent based upon how we conduct ourselves, behave, on all the, the institutions we form within an organization, our achievements, etc., etc., etc. Now, I'm not trying to be the world's greatest anthropologist. I am not. Here is one person who describes himself as an anthropologist. This is John Shuck. He's a friend of mine, but he's the sort of chairman of the Lean Global Network, the Lean Enterprise Institute, for good, for bad, whatever you think of the Lean Institute. But when he was running NUMI, because he was the highest non-Japanese sort of rated manager or whatever it was, position, title, whatever, at the time, and he was assigned the challenge of sorting out the joint General Motors Toyota venture, which is the Tesla factory in Fremont, California nowadays. It was the worst running plant. And if you go to my YouTube channel sometime at watchnigel.com, it will get to my YouTube channel. He recorded some video to a class I was running, which he was on site, and he came and joined the class for a period of time. At NUMI, they were running prostitution rings, and I'm not making this up, I promise you I'm not, in a car factory. Drugs, racketeering, gambling, all sorts of things were going off. They'd even set fire to the production line so that the fire alarms would go off so they could go watch the football game. So all of this sort of things were happening. And this is, John recounts all this in some detail in this monologue he gave, which was absolutely brilliant. But he said, what he learned from his experiences there, the way to change culture was not to change how people think, which is what all the agile folks try and do. You've got to change how you think. You've got to get the agile mindset, was to change how people behave. I hope you can't hear my dogs barking, but obviously somebody away from my studio is, I'll shut them up in a minute. So, and he did that. I mean, people are familiar with the lean concept of the and-on cord, the production line. You see a problem, you pull the cord. What he did, he made everybody on the line responsible for quality, but he gave them a tool where they could stop everything, literally. And I've been in Kentucky when 8,000 workers have stopped moving because one person pulls the cord and the line stops and everybody waits until the problem is fixed. That's called building in quality, concept of Jidoka. So you change how we behave, how we act, and the onus on the people, and you create a different culture. We go away from the craziness of the early GM days. It's a fantastic case study to read and to listen to John talk about, into a whole different world. I say to people when I'm training, if you at home, if you drink, smoke, do illicit substances, swear, and are nasty with everybody, then that's the role model you're forming for your children. And of course, the environment within the home is a certain type of environment. Hey, we might call that the culture of the household. Whereas if you do the opposite of those things, you'll get a very different culture in the home. So this is why I look at it. I try and simplify things. Dave says, I said to Dave, Dave will talk about it. So writing a new book, myself, Dave, and Professor Turner, John Turner from UNT. It'll be out sometime towards the beginning of the summer next year. It's all on decision-making and complexity. Let me just tell you, the stuff that Professor Turner and Dave talk about is mind-blowing. We've written this 12,500 word paper that's in peer review at the moment, where we are challenging and we're producing new theories and new models. And I even wrote a study guide for myself on the paper that I participated in because it was that damn good. It really is brilliant. But, we get into things like counterfactuals, and constructor theory and substrate theory and all this other stuff. And the reality of it is I synthesize a lot of what these really, really clever people do. And Dave's, somebody described him as a heart of gold and a brain the size of a universe. Yeah. I mean, he's a big softy, but he's insanely clever. And he truly is insanely clever. But I try and bring this down to a level that most of us can sort of process and use. And when I'm talking to organizations, there's no point using really, really long, big words that I've learned listening to Dave and others. And so I try and at least compress some of these things into simplistic terms. So if you think of culture as being a product of your behaviors, that's really simple. Might be wrong, it's just an opinion. So here's another one for you. Let's get into complexity, then we'll get down to where I'm going with all of this. So here's one for you, folks. Let me just move Menti on. Define a complex problem. Define a complex problem. It might have helped if you'd read the book that the last book we put out. There's 2 books coming, by the way. To follow up to the flow system book that Ashley was kindly waving around earlier. In the spring, we're finishing the manuscript next week, John and I, and the flow system playbook will be available. It goes to publishers in December. It should be out by about March, April. And that's really going to be the book that shows you the how-to. How do all these techniques work? How do I apply them? How do I understand how to use them? And we're going to write a sort of an introduction to that, which will be much more palatable by business leaders and those that don't want to read a lot of heavy material. So we're hoping that will be valuable and useful to you all. And that'll be a soft cover book, slightly larger format with worksheets in it and other things to help you understand how to use some of those tools. All right, so apologies for the dogs howling earlier on, but let's have a look. Okay, let's see how we're doing. We got a few answers anymore. Okay, let's have a look. Lose weight. I'm with you on that one. So no agreement on problem or response. Interesting. So we'll come back to that one. One that I can't solve. True. As many solutions as there are people looking at the problem. A problem with variables, you don't know what you don't know. Something where cause and effect are only identifiable in hindsight. No obvious solution. Okay, we've got some great ones. Eat pizza, drink beer and wine, and lose weight. That will work as long as you are ferociously exercising every day. If you're burning 20,000 calories a day, Marcus is going, no, it won't. Good, we'll have a conversation. I'm willing to be educated on that in the Q&A.
I do it and I don't lose it.
Okay. Carbs are my killer, by the way. And living in America, as Ashley will tell you, carbs are a killer. I mean, the whole diet in the US is carb based. So it's even harder for me because I don't eat meat anymore. I gave up meat when I met my wife. It was just, the girl on the meat, so I chose the lady, and that was that. Requires more than one step. A problem with known unknowns, which requires probing in order. So the people know Dave very well here. We think the problem, we don't know how to do it. Okay. I don't think I'm clever enough to articulate this. Something that requires emergence to solve existing techniques and defined processes can't solve. All right. Let me do this for you, because this is, somebody made this really easy for us all many moons ago. Oh, let me do that. This guy, Wes Churchman, in 1967, he gave us the 3 definitions of problems. So a complex problem is type 2. So a complex problem is where we agree on the problem, we don't agree on the solution. Climate change is probably a good example of that, maybe. We agree on the problem, apart from the silly right-wingers that are camped out in Texas waiting for JFK to come back. But apart from that, we do all accept we have a problem. In fact, and I'll give you an example of a complex problem. I was going to do a slide on this. I didn't have time to get the graphics all working properly before I did. People buy Tesla. Well, I mean, Tesla fans are absolutely obsessive, and there may be some on this call. You buy a Tesla to save the planet, or, I mean, I think most people buy a Tesla because it's cool and they don't want to buy gas. I don't think their primary motive is to buy it to save the planet. Some may have that green motive. The problem is, where's the electricity coming from? I looked at my electricity the other day, and only 30% of the electricity I get to my house comes from renewable sources. The rest are coming from fossil fuels. And I live in the great state of Texas, which all went to hell in a handcart last winter when the entire grid died a death because all those renewable things froze because they didn't winterize them, because nobody thought they'd ever need to. So I'm interested to see what January and February brings myself and Marcos and others in this part of the world come the new year. So that's a complex problem. Somebody mentioned a problem where you don't agree on the problem or the solution, and that's type 3, and that's actually known as a wicked problem. where we can't even agree on the problem. Maybe you could probably put the pandemic in this bucket. We know there's something going on, but try and get people to agree what it is and what caused it, and then how to deal with it. Of course, we're in that wicked problem scenario. I'm sure you could put a few others in there. So, and let me move on my slide. And of course, Dave gave us Cynefin, and he's changed it lots of times. So it's now the 5 C's. I only bother putting confused in the middle because then I have to get into long conversations about aporia and aporetic and all this sort of thing, which he puts in the middle. And I even simplify this even more. I tell people, if you're into systems thinking, the systems theoretical approaches, the sort of Toyota production system, Deming type thinking, then you're in a more predictable world. And as you become more and more unpredictable, you start to get into the complex thinking world. And I simplify that even more, which is where, as I say, if you're in the predictable world, it looks a lot like Toyota, standardized, repeatable process, linear, ordered, predictable, and the resources, the people, machines, the agents in the system are fixed allocation. And actually the only unpredictable element in here are the people, because they are by definition complex adaptive systems. On the left, you've got, the game of football or soccer for the non-Brits in the room, which is non-linear, unordered, and unpredictable. Everybody has a role. Everybody's skilled and trained and has a position in the team and a position on the field or the pitch. But the minute the whistle goes, you're now in a completely unpredictable world, and you've got a dynamic allocation of resources, even where the goalkeeper will run down the field and score a goal in the opposite end, although that's not his defined role. So now we're starting to see where we're going. And this is important because everybody's out there applying all these tools and techniques, be it agile, lean, or complexity thinking tools and techniques, but they're not actually considering the type of work we're doing. Is the work actually complex? Is the work truly complex? Is the work where we can't agree on the problem or the solution, so it's wicked, or we agree on the problem but not the solution? Is it actually complex work? Because throwing complexity thinking tools at predictable work is silly. It's like throwing lean thinking at a highly complex or wicked problem. It doesn't work. And that's why a lot of the Kanban practitioners who are using lean metrics are successfully proving that the work isn't complex, because you can't use lean metrics in complex work because you've got high variability, high unpredictability. So how the hell can you use those predictable measures, cycle time, lead time, takt time, in an unpredictable work, which proves that the work is not unpredictable? And most Scrum is planned with predictable outcomes. It's not a set of random experiments. It's not, the modern scientific method at play here, folks. It's just predictable, planned, incremental improvements. There's some unknowns that emerge, but it's not truly experimental work. True empiricism means we don't know what the outcome is. If you know what the outcome is or it's predictable, it's not truly empirical. So this is where people need to start thinking about the tools and techniques they're using. So I've got another exercise for you. Now, for some of you, you can consider your work context, not your personal context. Consider your professional context, where you're working. I'm going to give you a Menti slide for this in a second, but where you work in the context you're in. What I want you to do is to think about your day-to-day work, whether you're a consultant, a practitioner, an employee, whatever it is. Are you in a predictable or an unpredictable context in your day-to-day working environment? So if you use Cynefin, if we're in a clear domain, the outcome is clear. And I'll bring up the Menti slide in a second. The outcome is clear. The problem or situation is so simple that an individual can make an effective decision, usually by following some established procedures. You may call them best practices or something like that. If the work is, however, complicated, but still predictable, so the outcome is predictable and controllable, but the knowledge and expertise is rarely in a single person. So we need some teamwork. You'd sort of indicate your working environment would be complicated. However, if you feel it's more complex, all the people, and Dave wrote this, by the way, all the people, just in case you want to disagree with it, all the people and things are entangled in many ways that cannot be fully understood. Everything is connected, but the impact of change cannot be predicted. So if that's you, you'd be in the complex domain. And finally, if you're in chaos, in a chaotic state, by definition, it's random. Do something, see what happens, and then decide how to respond. So switch back to Menti, and I've got this exact thing there. You'll get a blue dot, and you can move the blue dot around and drop it somewhere in Connevin. You can stick it right in the middle if you're confused, that's okay. But how would you categorize your current day-to-day working environment? Because this is really important of how we, and think about your work context here, not life at home or in the world at large, because everybody will be down in the bottom left probably, but in your day-to-day professional or working environment.
And Nigel, while folks are doing that, just to give a time check, it's almost 8 o'clock here.
Okay, I'll move quickly.
But I'm sure we can probably go over an extra 15, 20, 30 minutes.
I am maybe 5 or so minutes away from finalizing the, oops, sorry, we're back here for you. 5 or so minutes away from finalizing this presentation part. So good time check, thank you. All right, let's have a look at some of the dots. Now, let me tell you, I use this technique in companies all the time, and Mentimeter does this. Now, most companies, what do you expect most companies are hoping for? Where do you think they want the dots? Any idea? On the right. So, but look at the dots, and you're giving your feedback from the world. So when you got a number like 6, it means most people, too many dots are in a close proximity, so it just adds them together. That's what that means. So you've got some people in this predictable world. So if you're in this world here, stop using Scrum, stop worrying about Agile, stop worrying about complexity thinking, use plain old systems thinking, tools and approaches. Even project management will work there well. Marcus, oh, you're just waving at me. If you want me to, you can shout at me. And over on here, we've got some people in the complex one. Of course, we've got some people in this liminal area. Let me switch over to my slides, which have all gone fuzzy again on the screen. So this is something that Dave used to talk about a lot, and I co-opted and sort of did a slide on: bounded applicability. Bounded applicability. So this basically means, and I'll simplify this, all tools have limits and are context specific. And you're reaching the boundaries or the limits of those tools when the cost benefit ratio of handling new issues become negative. So no matter how much better and more furiously you apply Scrum or whatever, it doesn't get any better. And so what I often say to people is, you don't understand the work, you're miscategorizing it, or you're using the wrong tools for that work. And so, and this is where I use the sort of Tom and Jerry type cartoon. Tools have context. A toothbrush and a hammer are great tools. Both have great utility. Don't mix them up, because in either case, it's going to hurt a lot. So context is key. Everything is contextual. One size does not fix all. This is why SAFe doesn't work predominantly and has a lot of problems, because it tries to solve everything with one big chunk of stuff rather than focusing on these tools have a utility, find the best way to use them in your context. So there's many tools, methods, approaches, and techniques, but there's no prescription. And I use this just to annoy their big consulting houses, one PowerPoint master's drive, because that's what they do. They back up the bus. People like Accidentia back up the bus, and that was an intentional slip. And off get the PowerPoint army at $300, $400, $500 an hour. And then they propose a framework. And about 3 to 5 years later, you're doing another transformation. There's a problem with that word transformation, of course. But you have to ask yourself, if you were so successful 3 years ago, 5 years ago, why are we doing it again? And this is the slide I use to sort of debrief this. So over on the predictable side, in the clear area, you've got your current best practices or established procedures. In the sort of the where we need expertise and we're predictable, you've got operational excellence, the lean thinking, Six Sigma type folks. Project management works fine. If it's predictable, there's nothing wrong with the Gantt chart. It's predictable. Although I hate them, there's nothing wrong with them in that context. And, things like 5 why, root cause analysis doesn't work in the complex domain, by the way, because it's a reductionist technique and you can't reduce back to a single root cause with a complex problem. Whereas you get over into the sort of liminal area, this liminal boundary, liminal just means the transitional zone between the two areas. So as you're moving more from predictability into the unpredictable area, then we start to find that agile techniques like Scrum are valuable and have utility. And as we get much further into the unpredictable world, we're really into this sense-making sort of world. We're not really, because nothing's predictable. So we have to start making sense and trying to figure out what to do. And of course, if you are in chaos, as some of you said, then hope, prayer, wishful thinking, something like that may work down there. I want to do one other thing on Menti with you, because I thought this was a bit of fun. Let's continue with the blue dots. So in your context, in your professional context, when something goes wrong, who is responsible? And this is, don't tell Dave I'm using triads because he owns the patent on these. So, when something goes wrong, who is responsible in your professional context? The team, the individual, or the manager? Who is responsible? See if we can get a few answers and we knock this out of the park in the next 2 or 3 minutes. I'll give him a punchline, then we'll do some berate Nigel session for a few minutes. So, all right, let's get a few more dots because there's still, well, it's 37 people. We're doing well. We've got quite a few people in the room. So we've got enough people to get a quorum of useful results. I use these techniques all the time and I strongly encourage you genuinely. Dave's just released a new version of SenseMaker. He's in the process called Pocket Genba, and he'll give me credit for that name, I promise you, because it came out of my head. But he's bringing out an app-based version where you can do a lot of sense making, low cost, very rapidly. And I think there's going to be a free version as well. And I really encourage you because these are the types of questions I actually run with large global corporates. Let's have a look. Now, look at this. So when you start to look at this, you could sort of start to draw some smaller triangles. But if I put a triangle here, only a couple of you are thinking the manager's responsible. Dave always says the folks in the middle are trying to hedge the bets here. But the majority of people are blaming somebody. Yeah. There's no manager accepting responsibility. Now, again, you're not managers, or maybe some of you are, but the context, you're looking at your professional life. But what we tend to find a heavy blame culture when we see patterns like this. And if you do this over 200, 300, 400 people, you get real clusters. And if you do it over a period of time, which is what you really need to do with sense making, repeating this over a period of time to actually truly make sense, then you start to see these patterns. Very powerful tools. So we start to see in your organizations, in your context, there's a culture of blame, not a culture of managers stepping forward, because somebody was added a dot, I think. But the whole lean focus is, if you fail, it's my fault because I let you down as your manager, as your leader, as your guide, mentor, etc. Let's try one more of these. I am most influenced by leaders, executives, timelines or deadlines, or the people I manage. So in your professional context, answer this honestly. How are you most influenced? By the bosses, the executives, the leadership, by deadlines and timelines, or by the people who work for you? So again, it's difficult. I anchored you a little bit in this, but this is a friendly meetup, not a professional execution of this. But these are things I highly recommend you try. Get the free trial of SenseMaker from Dave from Cognitive Edge and start doing some of this stuff with your organizations. Much better than the Likert surveys and these Office 360s and all that sort of stuff, which are usually very poor. Let's have a look. So again, if you start to see patterns like this, what you're seeing is that you've got a lot of top-down management pressure. You've got managers telling you what to do. You've got managers pushing and pressing on the deadlines. And what you actually want is the people closest to the work influencing the decisions. This is collective leadership. This is distributed leadership. We wrote a lot about this in the book, of course. But this is how you empower people. And the people who know the most about the work are the people who are doing the work. And the people at the top, I can tell you, because I was over in Europe with the CEO and her team in a very large division of a very large global company, and they're clueless as to what's going on the ground level. But if you give them this type of visual, they can make a fast decision. This is valuable stuff. This is why SenseMaker is so powerful. Now, what else did I have here? Last one for you. This is called a Stones chart. This is 2 axis. So you put a dot on here to indicate whether you do something never or often, so almost never or very frequently along the x-axis, and on the y-axis, whether it's very easy or very hard to do it. So tell us about talking to customers. Is it easy or hard to talk to them? Do you do it very little or very often? Where would you put your dot? Again, in your professional context, think about in your professional context, where would you put the dot? Because these are the types of questions that you would want to be asking the organizations you're working with. And you can do this again with SenseMaker. It's completely anonymous. You gather this data, and if you gather it from lots of people over a period of time, by repeating this, you start to see the patterns, and this helps you to better inform how we work within our organizations. Any more dots? I'm conscious of time. Let's see how we're doing. I'll give you a couple of seconds more because I'm interested not to bias the outcomes with this. All right, we're going to about 18. Let's have a look. So you start to see, look at this, you see. And this is it, look. This is bad, really bad. Think about it. The majority of people are not talking to the customers. And look at these. It's quite easy to talk to the customer, but they're never doing it. So you have to ask why? Because we're not developing the best products and services if we're not talking to the people who matter. And of course, up here, we're getting people who are saying they never do it or rarely do it, and it's very hard to do it. And here we've got a couple of people who it's easy and often, but then you ask the question, are you looking for the patterns here? These are your weak signals. Why is it hard? We do it often, but it's hard to talk to them. Why should it be so hard? So these are the types of things I do with organizations to help reveal where I need to focus on doing things. All of this is behavioral, by the way. All of it's behavioral. This is all about behaviors because managers won't let you, because directors won't let you, because they put barriers and bullshit from compliance and all this nonsense in, oh, you can't do that because of all these rules and regulations. But it's just nonsense. Okay, that's the end of the Menti stuff. I will share those with you. 3 last slides for you. The theory of constraints from Goldratt and some of the work we're doing on counterfactuals and constructor theory will enhance this work. You'll see that coming in the white paper once we can publish it. The theory of constraints basically says a constraint is anything that prevents the system from achieving a better performance measure towards its goal. Shared mental models, alignment, collaboration, shared outcomes, goals. This is what we're looking at. And all that happens in companies, you go stoke it up here, you go and get a lot of people doing agile or something here, and it just overwhelms the next bottleneck in the system, the next constraint in the system. Bottlenecks aren't always, bottlenecks are a type of constraint. All constraints are not bottlenecks. Just bear that in mind. So my proposition here is the biggest challenge, the biggest constraint is you. And I mean that as the royal you, not you as an individual particularly. It's not technological, it's behavioral. That's our biggest constraint, which led me to make this proposition, which Dave says he's not sure he agrees with yet. We have to have a few more beers and a few more conversations. All complexity in an organization is human-derived. And what I would say to you is, if you remove all the people, is the problem still complex? So that's the thing. I'll leave you with that thought. If you remove all the people, is the problem still complex? You could argue actually global warming or climate change is a human-derived problem. If we remove the people, it wouldn't be a problem. We found that in the pandemic, when everybody stopped flying and driving, the planet got really healthy again. I mean, Venice, I was in Venice not so many weeks ago. Luckily, I was teaching out there, so I got to look at Venice again. And the canals are all black and murky. You can't see in them. But during the pandemic, the dolphins were swimming into the canals and people could actually see the fish and the dolphins in the canals in Venice. And now it's just opaque, dirty water again, and all the traffic started. So that's a proposition for you. No, sure. Got loads of questions. I haven't been reading this at all. But over to you guys. I know, Giles, you've got a hard stop, but we got, I don't know, 20 minutes or something.
Yeah, we've actually got 20 minutes or so till 8:30. So, which is a good time. We normally wrap up at 8:30. So
sure.
If we want to do questions, the usual process we normally do is ask people to use the raise hand feature in Zoom, which cues people to the top left in the screen, and then people can come on, ask their question to Nigel, and we get an answer. I will monitor also the chat in case anybody writes. If no one wants to come up on Zoom and do it in person, and they want to add it in the chat channel, I will read it out to Nigel on their behalf. So I invite anybody who wants to do this now, please queue up. Please do raise your hand.
Just reading what Ashley wrote about, and she's absolutely right in chat when she wrote about Dave started quoting the Bible. He really did, because he has a Jesuit background. You can ask him about this when he comes, but
that
really
was started a message to Giles. And I can't delete apparently.
It went to everybody, but that's all right, Ashley. It's called transparency and openness and a foobar. But yeah, so we were backwards and forwards with Ashley, and Dave started quoting the Bible. So that set him up well for the next session. But I don't know, thoughts, ideas, comments, questions, slanderous remarks. You know, was it Al Shalloway always accuses me of ad hominem, and he doesn't really understand that how ad hominem works, by the way, but I may even be pronouncing that badly. But Al and I go toe to toe. Ashley.
Unless someone else wants to go first, but I don't see a hand raised. I have kind of a burning question I've been wanting to ask you, Nigel. So in speaking with you and Dave and Simon and appreciating tools are for certain situations and depending on the needs of the complexity, complicatedness, etc. But going to scaled agile framework, I know, like don't throw tomatoes at me, guys. But you know what? Appreciating not one tool fits all the situations, right? But what is the alternative? Frankly speaking, if we're talking at the enterprise level of visualizing the flow of work, like appreciating the limitations of it and what you said with the incremental building of requirements, it's an agile. Yes, I agree. But at some point, like, does it matter? Is there a better way to actually centralize and visualize and do that kind of LPM mentality, really? What alternatives do people use?
So, look, my opinion of SAFe is that there's a lot of good tools in SAFe. They have bastardized some of them. If you read when I took the SAFe SPC some years ago, I did number 4. I didn't bother after that. I just did it to learn more about it. And I passed, but my exam results were terrible in 2 topics. And one of them was lean and one of them was Scrum. So I'm ex-Toyota, nearly 20 years on and off in and out of Toyota. And I worked with Jeff and Ken for a number of years. So you'd think I know about Scrum, you'd think I know about lean. And the 2 things I scored really poorly on in the SPC was lean and Scrum. Everything else I just answered based on the training because it was all their made up stuff. And that's half the problem, is that they took a bunch of tools, they distorted some of them, changed some of them in different ways, and then they threw them all on a big picture. And give you an example, they just added value streams. I got news for you. Value streams have been around for about 50, 60 years. You know, Toyota's been using them for a while. The concept's been around for a while. And suddenly this is this great revelation that we've all got value streams. And so I don't have an issue per se with using SAFe as a scaffold. And Dave will talk about scaffolding. In fact, we talk about it a lot in the paper we've written in the new book that's been authored, and in the process of being authored. A scaffold is a temporary structure to help get you over a certain hump. I would start by first asking the organization, what's the problem they're trying to solve? Because, you know, they get McKinsey, Deloitte, Accenture, and all the others in there. And I know lots of people in these organizations, and some of them are genuinely very, very good and very talented. And they come in and of course, the answer is you need whatever the latest framework is they're selling, or the latest tooling. There used to be ERP, then MRP, then CRM, and then it became something design thinking, agile, Scrum, and goodness knows it'll probably be Flow next year. We'll have McKinsey's Flow framework. You wait and see, which I'll claim some credit for, I'm sure. But the reality of it is, you've got to understand what's wrong. And most organizations have created a level of complexity in the way they have built, the way they interact, they collaborate, they cooperate, they get work done. And what they're looking for is something to solve the organizational design, the organizational chaos, even the organizational dysfunctions. And so they go by SAFe, because the consultants tell them that'll fix it. But the challenge is throwing a bunch of tools at an organization that has a lot of challenges with its human interactions, its human factors, aren't going to solve it. A lot of, no disrespect to them, and I recorded a podcast with Pam Dukes the other day, a really good friend of mine who used to work with me and now is doing some amazing stuff in her own work. I think she's hanging out on here in the background somewhere, sneaking around, maybe see her in the list. But I was talking to her about, solving some of these challenges and things. And really what we need to do is we need to start understanding what is causing the organization not to function effectively. And let's go back to some of those basic fundamentals. You said Simon's going to talk about some of that in the future. Let's start going and looking at the value streams. Let's start mapping and visualizing how work gets done, rather than this idea of work, this notion as work as imagined, and actually start looking at whether or not the work we do needs the tools that were being solved. That's why I use that Knebbing exercise, predictable versus unpredictable, bounded applicability. It's okay to use certain tools and frameworks as a scaffold, as I say, to give you some structure, some disciplined way of working. But then you need to be able to remove that scaffolding, otherwise it becomes a crutch, or it becomes a rigid exoskeleton, which prevents you from moving only in the way it wants you to move. So it's not that I have some issues with the way SAFe have bastardized some of the tools and some of the fundamental and foundational learning. You can't just take what Toyota did and change it with a few words and rebrand it and say it's the same thing. So, they say the safe house of lean. Well, if you want to see a house of lean, go look at Toyota, and then, do something different, or just use the fundamental teaching. It's just a bugbear. But there's nothing wrong with taking some of the individual elements and applying them in a contextual situation that works. Kanban's great as a visualization tool. It's better as a just-in-time tool, but it's actually really good as a visualization tool. But that isn't going to solve the fact you can't speak to each other and collaborate and agree. And it's not going to solve the meeting culture and the bureaucracy and the red tape and the stupid process and procedures that you've accumulated and created and mangled over 10, 20, 30 years in a large corporation. Now I see some hands up, Ashley, and I don't want to be
we've got a couple of people. So we got Mal and Annika with their hands up. So Mal, let's go use, mate, and ask your question away.
Well, thank you very much, and thank Nigel to share everything. And I'm glad that Topo Chico is going from Mexico, and we share our water.
It's the best water ever. This is the way I got off soda, because it's got like a hint of grapefruit. I have a fridge with about 60 bottles in. This stuff rocks. If you're in
Nigel,
America,
what you missed at the start was Marcos holding up exactly the same bottle as you as well.
So it's a thing in Texas, it really is. But yeah, so Mal, what else do you want to add other than it's great water?
So my question was that thank you, and I'm gonna take notes if Giles and Ash share the recording. But how can you explain Agile for the beginners, for the lack of a better word, for the muggles, that when I explain Agile and just that is very mystifying, and it has a lot of buzzwords like this Agile and sprints and a lot of the things. And the way that I tend to explain it is with the Agile onion. So that the tools and there's a direct inversion, and it's inverse. The more tangible and the more powerful it is, and of course the tools and everything that you shared is the less powerful for transformation for an organization. But for all that, the things that you explain and how to explain the complex problems, and especially for the companies and the people that don't know what kind of problems they have, how would you explain to someone that has no context whatsoever and it's really beginning with its journey, to explain that the tools and that SAFe or Scrum or something is not going to save the world?
So the first thing I do, and I've said this earlier and I'll just repeat briefly, is to understand what their problems are. What are they trying to fix? What are they trying to solve? Why do they believe that this thing they keep reading about on Harvard Business Review and McKinsey and blah, 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 what is this thing any use to them? Because, if you're making house bricks, you really don't need scaled Agile. It ain't going to help you a great deal, because house bricks don't change that often. and you've probably got a pretty much commodity-based business. So, some lean thinking, some operational excellence, some, better customer-first focus might be much more valuable if you're making bricks than if you're trying to build rockets to Mars type of thing. And so the first thing is I understand that. The next thing is I just tell them it's a philosophy. It really is just a philosophy. I'll explain some of the basics, and I do some exercises in class. I use Lego. I gamify the sort of things. I have executives playing with Lego and stuff, or using Mural. I've got Mural versions of it now for this sort of post-pandemic hybrid world. But I basically get them to understand the key, because most of the people at the senior level are making decisions, because by the time you're in at the team level teaching agile techniques, and tools, these people have already agreed with somebody that we're going to do this thing. They may not understand what it is. They just think it's work faster, work harder, make, save money, make more money, which is a lot of the responses I get from executives, by the way, is this is what they think it is. And then I educate them basically on the fact it's about making better decisions. It's about being better informed, making better decisions, and then applying, and this is what really winds me up about the agile practitioners, applying fundamental lean thinking, which is eliminating all the non-value added activity. Because if you actually, I've proven this, if you put a lot of thought into lean thinking, do your value stream mapping, and go and identify all your constraints in the system, and then start working on the simple operational excellence aspects to remove the constraints in the system. And some of that's behavioral and bullshit red tape and bureaucracy. Removing that, you become more agile because you can make faster decisions and better decisions, because you're not encumbered by all these stupid processes and meetings about meetings, red tape, bureaucracy. When I actually explain it in these terms, and I have visuals and slightly more polite terminology for the professional audiences, then they go, now we know what you mean. It's not about the tools, although the tools will help us in certain contextual settings. If you've got a bunch of software folks, Scrum's good. If you've got a bunch of lawyers, Scrum ain't so good. But maybe a Kanban board would be useful to visualize the flow and the constraints and the bottlenecks of where all their legal steps are in the system. So this is where I start to talk. Now, I don't know if this is helping or any use to you. I'm conscious I've got Annika and Mike as well, and time is short.
Yeah. Go ahead. Thank you very much.
Annika.
Okay. Thanks, Mal. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we've got about 6-7 minutes left. So Annika, over to you. Upstairs.
Yeah, I'm upstairs with Giles. So yeah, really interesting. I like the way you're talking a lot about behaviours. I'm a coach, and I'm certainly experiencing that's the biggest bottleneck and problems that we're having. And I think one thing that I'm interested in is how you described accountability. How it was the blame thing, and I'm assuming that's based on your experience and what you've seen, because certainly where I am, we're working not to have that whole blame thing. And we know that we're never going to be right all the time, right? So rather than always being right, it's about making things right when we make mistakes and go wrong and that kind of thing. And being accountable is really being able to tell the story about why we made our decisions, what we've learned from it, and what we can do, so it doesn't happen again. So I'm interested in, is it just the way you talk about accountable, that's your experience, and actually we can change and improve the environment if we work in, if we change the definition and we start to get people focusing more that way?
So, yeah, I mean, I hear exactly what you're saying. We talk a lot about psychological safety, of course, Amy Edmondson's work around that, and the work that influenced her work. She made the phrase very popular, but the science behind it actually predates Amy's work as well. Incidentally, I heard the other day she charges $100,000 per day for consulting now. Yeah, I'm in the wrong line of work, folks. So I need to go to Harvard, become a professor, and then charge $100,000 a day. With a 2-word phrase she's made famous. I mean, I love her to bits. She's very clever, and I do admire her work. And she did get a copy of the book. But so we talk a lot about that. I really define accountability, responsibility, so people understand the linguistics. Because what happens is typically a lot of people get told to do the work, and are held accountable for the work, but actually they have no control over the decisions. They have no control over the direction it goes in. So distributed leadership, which is different to decentralized leadership, distributed leadership is really enabling, empowering those people who are doing the work to truly be accountable because they have the decision-making authority. So accountability is about being able to make the decisions. Responsibility is just being the people who are doing the work, the focus on the work. It's linguistically important because when you're talking to people in, say, Latin American, who are Portuguese or Spanish speakers, they have no differentiation. They only have one word, which is responsibility. But when you try and give them the differentiation between, well, who's making the decisions and who's doing the work? And that's why I made the slide, really to help that differentiation. But it really is about empowerment, psychological safety, the ability to speak up, pull the hand on cord, call BS, that type of thing. Mike, you get the dying seconds of this this session, sir. You've been smiling a lot, so I can't wait to see what you can ask me or say.
Maybe I'm just a smiley, happy person, Nigel, and certainly thank you for all your contributions. I just wanted to tackle what you said. So all complexity in organization is human-derived. And you said to better understand that, look at the sentence, if you remove all people in a problem, is it still a complex problem? And I'm just wondering, does machine language and AI as a thought experiment challenge that paradigm, especially when we're talking about something like, let's say, protein structures? So we're not talking about humans as the data. We're not talking about humans doing the problem solving, with the possible exception of creating models. But I wonder if that may, well, I'd love to know what you think about that.
You know, that's fascinating. And Ashley, you should I think that would actually make a great meetup. How does AI and ML affect complexity in human life? Or something like that, because it's interesting that, is it really, the other thing is it really AI, or is it just decision making based upon certain sort of inputs that we provided it with? I fear for the day, as Steve Hawking did, of when monsters that were endoskeletons for Arnie start tramping around the planet, and we've got Skynet and all that sort of bad thing come around. But and then I would probably say that complexity would be human derived, because guess what? We created that complexity. I'd like to come back to a meetup where that's a topic, and get maybe myself and Dave and Ashley, myself, Dave and Simon, and I'll bring John Turner, and I'll bring John Turner along, and we'll have a panel of the four of us, and we'll debate this particular topic, because that would be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, Feb or March next year, we'll plan it in to wrap up the series. Yeah,
we might as well do this once we've had them, everyone individually. Mike, you'll have to reach out, send us your question as the opening gambit for the panel event. Please do drop it in, send it to us, and we'll make sure that we arrange with Nigel and Dave and Simon and Professor
Turner, John Turner.
Thank you very much. Right,
he's the professor of team science and complexity thinking at the University of North Texas. So he's the first name on the book. He's the clever one. But it would make a fascinating. It would really make a fascinating session. I really do believe.
Fantastic wrap up. No, look, Mike, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for your time over the last 90 minutes. We always appreciate you guys coming along to see this. But Nigel, what can I say? Firstly, a big thank you from myself and Ashley and everyone here at the ALN who have come along to see you. Really appreciate it. Believe you me, I can't believe that 90 minutes has just happened. I'm genuinely, we could have probably sat here for another 90 and still not realized another 90 minutes had gone on. The questions are awesome. The chat has been on fire today with loads and loads of comments.
I've noticed I've been reading back.
Yeah, well, if you want to, just click save on the chat before we close down, and you get everything. Thank you, Femi, for keeping the chat alive as well. And I just want to obviously say thank you, Ashley, for creating this event and for getting Nigel lined up and for obviously doing an amazing intro at the start. For everybody else, We have Dave lined up in January as part 2 of this mini-series. And then we have Simon Wardley lined up in the first week of February for the final part. And if we can get a culmination 4-part mini-series master event to answer Mike's question and many others, then we will do. But Nigel, can I just say again, from myself and from everyone here and on behalf of Ashley, thanks for coming. Great to see you again, second time this year as well, mate. We look forward to having you back.
Rock and roll, guys. Have a great day, evening, night, wherever you are. I'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, Nigel. Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thank you.
And stop recording.